He was training his children to commit school shootings. He says that the 3-year-old son, the dead 3-year-old son, was somehow going to communicate with them from beyond, you know, from the grave. They was going to communicate with them to tell them which institutions of the United States government to attack first, whether it's schools, whether it was law enforcement or something else. I mean, I don't know how else you would describe that other than terrorism, but perhaps that's why the left's ignoring it, because it's coming from a radical Islamist ideology.
And it's unbelievable. I mean, you and I both know that prosecutors would not have taken this case and if they didn't think that it was a lockdown win. And so I think that prosecutors were as stunned as people like you and I when the judge showed obvious bias and said that the prosecutors were biased in being Islamophobic here. This is not Islamophobia. I don't care if this guy was a Catholic or a Southern Baptist. I would also want him behind bars and charged for the horrific things that he was doing to these children and the, heaven forbid, terroristic activities that he wanted to plan out.
Right. I don't think it matters what religion it is, but to ignore his motive, to ignore the ideology that was inspiring him is not only ignorant, it's dangerous because it allows these things to fester without us doing anything about it. This has been sort of a strategy of the left the last, dozen years, is downplaying the radical Islamist ideology. We actually aren't just seeing that here in America. We had an instance in London following that terror attack where a car went through Parliament Square and ran over pedestrians. The London mayor is now calling for car control. First he enacted gun control, then he called for knife control, now car control. The problem is not the weapon. The problem is not the gun or the knife or the car. The problem is the ideology that calls people or that teaches people to kill Westerners. That's the problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. And even though this young man, I believe he's 29 years old, was a citizen of the UK, he was an immigrant. So there was obviously, and you have to look at this, where did these people come from? What kind of ideologies are they bringing with them? And if they're not pro-Western civilization, if they're not pro-freedom and pro-liberty and pro the ideologies that, say that you and I are equal to men and that, all Gentiles have the right to live, then maybe we shouldn't be letting them in our countries. This mayor over in London is unbelievably idiotic because he said, well, maybe we should ban cars, but also we should make sure that people still have a right to assemble and lobby the parliament. You're making that more difficult, and you're making the argument that you want to make government bigger and you want to take away people's liberties, all the while trying to protect them. I mean, this is an argument, of course, that we've had in the United States since 9/11. It looks as if it's an argument that people in Britain are going to start having too, but I think it's absolutely idiotic. And it's also kind of, you and I talk about the slippery slope a lot here. I think the jokes on Twitter were, oh, are we going to ban U-Haul trucks now? Apparently, this is an argument that leftists thought we were taking seriously.
Right. I mean, when you and I said that, we were actually being the epitome of sarcastic.